Today, on our continuing series on the environment, I'd like to share some thoughts about the Environmental Protection Agency. Recently, we have heard that the power of the EPA to kind of set limits in terms of pollution has been challenged. Coal is the biggest polluter in terms of the atmosphere. Um, and power plant operators serve 40 million people. So you can see how extensive this is in our own country and how important this issue becomes when you think of all of those plants and the pollution that's involved. And really, when you look at it, the argument comes down to this. The industry has been claiming, and the courts have kind of upheld this in a sense that they must maintain reliable service. So the idea of going completely green and just using solar and wind power all at once, it's going to interrupt service. So what we have to do is we have to maintain service and then gradually add in these technologies that certainly would be better for our air, better for our atmosphere, better in terms of global warming. So we have to roll those in a responsible way over a period of time. The problem sometimes is when you say roll it in a responsible way, it can be a delaying tactic for taking any action at all. So you have to kind of balance that out and make sure that that's not the ploy that's being used. The argument that it comes down to with regard to the EPA and setting emissions limits is basically who should make these rules in terms of the limits that a particular company that's generating power for all these people. Who's going to set the limits in terms of how much pollution they can get away with? And so who's going to really do that? Should it be the Environmental Protection Agency? They would think, and their argument would be, well, we've been designated by Congress. That's really our function to preserve the air, the water, and the soil in the country to the best of our ability. So really, we should be the agency that does that. The counter argument to that, of course, is that, well, these are bureaucrats, they're unelected. Shouldn't it be done by representatives elected by the people? So who should really do this? The problem, of course, comes down to really a scientific question. Who is competent to regulate? Who has the skill set? Is it a legislator who can be greatly influenced by a lobbyist who is giving donations to your campaign? Is that the type of person you want to really set these regulations in place? Or do you want somebody who has got the expertise, the background, the knowledge to say, well, this is a harmful level of pollution? So this is the kind of the back and forth. The court, in its ruling in the spring of this year of 2022, that the court sided with the legislature and said, well, it's up to the legislature to enact these limits. It's not up to the EPA. So that's where the argument kind of comes down. What seems to be the reality of the situation, however, is that most of these businesses are realizing that, continuing down this path of pollution is not good for us as a business. And so they really are moving beyond a lot of these limitations that the EPA is trying to set up anyway, and they're moving in the right direction. Um, David Donninger, who's a climate change expert with the Natural Resource Defense Council, said that a court ruling is really, at this stage, was premature anyway because the EPA has not issued any guidelines. So why give a ruling when no guidelines have been issued? But the industry was concerned naturally that the guidelines would be, so severe that it would cripple their industries. and they would lose money, obviously, in that. So that's really the way the argument comes down. Who should set the limit? Should it be somebody with knowledge, somebody with expertise, or should it be a legislator who maybe doesn't have that background and who's influenced by the lobby that says, well, we don't want these stricter limits? The EPA is also, through government programs, given grants to help in minority and poor communities. And these are grants of $100,000 each. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has issued these grants. They've issued them to the Long Beach Latino Civic Association, the Flanders, Riverside, and Northampton Community Association, in terms of Long Island. 32 recipients in the state for a total of $3.1 million. And what they're called is Environmental Justice Community Impact Grant Awards. And they're recognizing the idea that if certain areas have been negatively impacted in terms of the environment, certain minority areas, we have to have a redress for that. That is wrong, that's improper. Why should a certain community be impacted negatively by that? So in Long Beach, the SOFA project, the Suburban Organic Farming in Action, is to listen, educate, and inform people from low-income communities about the importance of growing and eating organic produce to enhance their health. So what they're trying to do is take these communities, educate them, give them a sense of how to grow this produce and how to be effective, and really in terms of their nutritional value to really help them to raise that community up so that the negative impacts of the pollution are not felt as acutely in the community. In Flanders, the Citizen Science Environmental Justice Investigation, they're looking into the health of our local ecosystem. The Long Island Science Center will train a fleet of citizen scientists to conduct environmental investigations. So the hope is with that, training the people from the local area, empowering them to look at different environmental problems, to work against them, to improve the quality of life in their community. The Environmental Protection Agency defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So basically, you're empowering these communities where they have been negatively impacted in terms of the environment, either by the location of certain power plants in their area or harm that has been done to their air, water, and soil. You're trying to empower them so that they can reverse this trend. So here we have, I think, on a local level, the Environmental Protection Agency trying to do something positive to help. And then we have the larger question of the regulations and who should frame the regulations, how should they be framed. I think these are important issues for us to be aware of and to realize that we must take responsibility for improving our environment. And we should do that, obviously, in cooperation with our Environmental Protection Agency and in some way with the industries, obviously, and the legislators.